Well, it's 3:30 and I guess I'm supposed to start. Can anybody tell me if you hear me?
I
Yes,
can
we
hear you.
can.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about the essence of and sort of 48 years of trial and learning and why it is that I'm a recovering systems thinker. I was going to do this presentation with one slide, and this was it. Essentially the essence of what I've learned from 48 years of study in the systems arena is one word or one question. The question is and. There's an old Sufi story that goes, because you understand one, you think you understand two, because one and one is two. But first, you have to understand and. As to how I got here, I used to do this as an unfolding series of pieces, and I found out repeatedly that every time I did that, I wanted to talk about the piece that came 3 steps later. So I stopped doing that, and I simply present the whole presentation on one slide, and I'll walk through it from piece by piece. So this journey of aha moments, I probably should begin to say that I begin every day with the assumption that everything that I currently believe could be wrong. And many days, a lot of those things are. But in 1975, a professor said, for this course, we're going to read Stafford Beer's Platform for Change. Not that I would recommend that you read it, but for me, it was like taking mind-altering drugs, I guess, because to say that I became an evangelist for the systems paradigm would be an understatement. People would ask me what it was that I did, and as I began to tell them, you could see their eyes glaze over as they were asking themselves, why did I ask them? How the hell do I get him to stop? But I persisted, but my greatest enemy was a blank sheet of paper because I couldn't figure out where to start. I always wanted to start in the right place. And I started in 75 developing simulation models in GPSS on an IBM 360, which is only slightly more amusing than watching paint dry, because it's the day of punch cards and you create your deck and you submit it and you wait till tomorrow and find out that you got an error on one of the cards and you have to fix it and submit it, and it goes on and on and on. But I persisted developing quantitative models and qualitative models, and continuing to do modeling and simulation and in a system dynamics arena, believing that systems thinking was just a not very grown up version of system dynamics. And in 1991, I read a Scientific American article about Stella that was available from my Macintosh, and I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. But still, I could not, in all of my research and reading, I couldn't understand why it was that there were thousands of models and methods that claimed to embrace the systems paradigm, because system dynamics seemed to be enough. And then I was fortunate enough to run into Michael C. Jackson's Systems Thinking Creative Holism for Managers. And in that book, he presents this framework of a system which varies from simple to something you could believe that you could design and build, to something complex, which maybe you could perceive to understand if you studied it for a while. And participants spent based upon the extent to which their goals, objectives, and beliefs are aligned, from unitary, pluralistic, coercive, and these people over here never agree on anything. And within each one of these domains, there are a number of approaches which are likely to provide results, meaningful results in that particular area. And system dynamics was down here with a number of other approaches. And all of a sudden, I developed an understanding of why it was that there were lots of different approaches in this arena, and systems thinking was, in fact, sort of a large, broad topic that encompassed numerous methods and models for a good reason. And I was delighted for about a weekend, and realizing that I had spent 20 years developing some level of expertise in system dynamics, and now realizing that I actually needed to learn a whole bunch of different methods. And I said, self, you're just not that smart. So I asked myself, well, being depressed for a few days, I asked myself this amazing question, which was, how do you develop a model? Now, I hadn't asked myself this question in a long time, back here when I was having problems about where to start. And it seems as though over the years, I had actually developed an approach to developing models, which I didn't realize. And it's extremely simple in terms of begin with a situation or topic you want to understand, ask what influences this, and ask what does that influence, and then ask 2 or 3 repeatedly for all the elements until you run out of answers. And when you run out of answers, explain your model to someone else, asking them how to improve it. And then don't be an idiot and argue with their feedback. Seek to understand. This last part took me a lot longer to get to because, I would labor over the development of a model, and then I would want to send it to people and impress them with how smart I was. And, they really didn't care. Would develop one of these models and send it to somebody, and after a while, if they sent back a comment at all, it was a comment like, well, that's nice. But what they really wanted to say is, why the hell did you send this to me? And I came to understand, I made a connection that a model is actually a lot like a play. And if what we have done, it seems, for years is if you go to the play and you sit there and you watch the relationships unfold between the actors from one act to another, if the play was done relatively well, at the end, when you leave, you take the story with you. Because as Bateson said, it's the pattern that connects. And I made that connection between a model and a play, and I said, oh, what we do all the time is you haven't seen the play, but the playwright walks up to you, hands you the script, and 10 minutes later says, what do you think? There is no way that you can absorb that piece of material in that form, in that time frame. It's ludicrous. So I realized that I had been inflicting my models on other people for decades. And I was so excited. I went out and I developed this model about The Boy Who Cried Wolf, which simply unfolds the Aesop's fable piece by piece, so that it starts out with the boy and crying wolf, and the boy wants attention and he's bored tending sheep, so he cries wolf, and the townspeople come running, and it's a boredom relief loop. And then he cries wolf, and if there is a wolf, it's truth, and it adds to belief-o-meter. So it's an improved belief loop. And then if he cries wolf and there is no wolf, it's a lie, and it diminishes the belief-o-meter, and it's a reduced belief loop. And I did this with a video voiceover that unfolded it as a story, so that by the time I get to the end of the story, you understand the model, as opposed to just sending you the model and say, what do you think? So I sent it to somebody and I said, what do you think? And a couple of days later, he sends me back the story from the wolf's perspective, which was a real aha moment, because I realized that there's the boy's perspective, the wolf's perspective, the townspeople, the sheep's perspective, the farmer's, there's all of these different perspectives that are meaningful perspectives from the agent which has those perspectives. And they all need to be considered if you're really going to understand the situation. So I continued trying to figure out how to tell stories. And here is one that accidentally arose. And someday maybe I'll tell the story about where it came from. But I'm sitting at the table in the morning having a pleasant breakfast. And my wife yells down from upstairs, are you finally going to clean up that unsightly growth around the bird feeder? I'm getting tired of looking at it. And when that happens, this whole series of historical events passes before my eyes. as to how it was that I got myself into this situation. See, I deal with a lot of frustration on an ongoing basis, and the Pleasant Breakfast helps me deal with the frustration. And lately, over the past several days, there's been a bunch of birds outside on the railing, and they've added to my Pleasant Breakfast. So after several days, I realized that, well, why don't I go ahead and install a bird feeder to increase the birds at the feeder, increasing the birds outside to increase my Pleasant Breakfast. And this actually works because it does. It attracts more birds. It increases the attractiveness of the garden, which attracts more birds, which adds to my Pleasant Breakfast. And I'm just delighted. But then, have you checked the price of birdseed these days? So the birds eat the birdseed, and I have to buy more, which adds to my frustration. And then the birds at the feeder create spillage, which increases the need to buy birdseed, which adds to my frustration. And the birds at the feeder attract squirrels, which decrease the birds at the feeder, increases the need to buy birdseed, increases spillage, and adds to my frustration. And then the spillage promotes unsightly growth, which increases my frustration. And then the spillage attracts rodents, and I have to figure out how to deal with them. And now the birds are pooping all over the railing, and I have to figure out how to clean that up. And then the question is, okay, what's the real problem? And I'm not going to tell you. It's up to ponder. But the thing is, rather than simply sending you this model and saying, what do you think? If it's unfolded as a story, by the time I get to the end of the story, you have a sense of what the model depicts, as opposed to simply, trying to figure out for yourself what all of the relationships mean. So this persisted for a while until I got to a point of realizing it's overwhelming, because this is a model that I really liked because it made a lot of sense, and I unfolded this a number of times to get it to an order that made sense for me. But by the time I get to the end, all right, all of the pieces end up being overwhelming for the person I'm trying to explain it to. So the question was, how do I abstract this to something that's more manageable? And I finally realized that I could depict this way and talk about, there's an effort to accommodate births, avoid pregnancy, and this promotes unwanted pregnancy, and this is actually shifting the burden structure. This promotes unwanted pregnancy and is actually another shifting the burden structure. So altogether, this is two shifting the burden structures connected together. And if somebody says, what is this? I can simply click on it, and it will show you that piece of the model that is the set of relationships that are responsible for accommodating births. And I've been sort of thinking that this is actually another archetype, because I've run into this numerous instances where we accommodate something, we avoid something, or we avoid something else. And to Ackoff's point, repeatedly saying, if you do a thorough investigation, regardless of where you thought the problem was, the actionable problem is almost always somewhere else. So I've continued to do this and tell stories about things that are of interest to me, continuing to use this model, and to realize that the only reason to develop a model and send it to someone else and ask for feedback is in the hopes that they might provide questions that I didn't think of, so that we could develop a better understanding of the set of relationships. And to what I finally got to was, rather than having to learn a dozen different models and methods to understand something and not argue with people about their methods, all of the models and methods have the same intent. It's simply to understand relationships and their implications. So I tell stories about relationships and their implications, and people say, well, doesn't that sort of relate to everything? And I say, that's the curse, because everything has become fascinating. I have trouble staying focused because everything seems to connect to everything else. And as soon as you read the paragraph, you're off in 2 or 3 different directions, following the connections, because it's amazing, it's fascinating. But I continue to find that this approach gets me to a level of understanding that's useful. And I'm sort of amazed that it boiled down to be this simple. And I could belabor the point with a lot of these other pieces. But if you'll ask some questions, we could see what comes out. Thoughts? Ah, well, that was good. All right, let me ask this question. Where did I go wrong? Manny, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes.
No, the story that you have shared is so fascinating. At least from my perspective, I'm trying to absorb what he just said, right? With the saying that goes, all models are wrong, some are useful, right?
Yes.
And personally, for me, I've been kind of studying sense making and adaptive organizations, organizational learning. As you said, you start somewhere and then suddenly one paragraph leads you into something else. And you see connections everywhere. You see connections from personal learning. The very first word you've used is awaken, right? That itself is such a fundamental concept for somebody to be awakened first at an individual level to understand who they are, where they are going, and then you follow a journey. So it is such a fascinating journey. I wish everybody can tell a story of their life through a simple diagram like this.
Well, thank you. I'm not sure what I do with that. I mean, it's here is a post in the chat. Hope it comes out okay. The first link is a link to this model, all right, which is done in Kumu and it's public. The second one is my email address, and the third one is my LinkedIn account. If you come to the model, it will probably look like this initially. All right. I've used this a number of times, and at each one of these places, there's a 20-minute video of me doing a presentation and then a whole bunch of Q&A about it. And here's some references that if somebody says, where do I start? Here's where I point them to, the 3 references.
Okay, can I ask a question? Interesting. Yeah. I have been talking to at least a dozen individuals in different walks of life, from accomplished professors to corporate executives. Minimum is 40 years, right? And they all have a story, but once you talking to them, they will tell you a story, but there is no visualization of the journey that they've gone through, like the way you're describing. So the question is it easy for, with some guidance from you, is there a way, people for them, even for their own sake, just to understand their 40-year journey, right? Where were the aha moments? Because there is so much wisdom that comes from lived life, lived experience, right? Knowledge today is a commodity, but the difference comes in the human wisdom, right? So what I've kind of listened to and still absorbing is what you're presenting is the wisdom that you gained over the years. I think there are a lot of things that people can uh, uh, kind of get from what you're doing. Is there a way they can map something? Can I map my own journey? Can other people follow a journey? And then see a pattern. Oh man, I'm able to connect to these kind of people. These kind of concepts interest to me. So if there is a way we can connect, kind of a borderless value creation, what type of people should I connect, and how we can accelerate value creation, both in the public domain as well as in the social side. It is a fascinating idea to me.
Manny, I have become convinced that for most people, modeling is an unnatural act. All right, in terms of actually developing a visualized model, connecting the dots. And I used to go to people, and it was like pulling teeth to get them to develop a model, because they needed one to see how the pieces connected together that they were thinking about. And finally I said, well, let me try something different. So I developed the stealth approach to modeling. So if I sit down with you and the question is, what are you wrestling with? So as you begin to tell me what you're wrestling with, I say, can I take some notes? And I start taking notes, but my notes look like a model.
Okay.
But I never mention model to you. All right. I just start connecting the dots as you're saying things. Right? And after a few minutes, I begin asking you questions about my notes. Right? And within 15 or 20 minutes, you're saying, oh, we ought to add this piece over here and connect this to this, and this connects in. Oh, we forgot this piece. All right. And we've never mentioned the word model. Right? And it's just absolutely beautiful when it happens, because when they get done, they go, wow. The whole idea is to enable people to realize how smart they are.
In fact, any new city I visit, I make sure that even though I know where I'm going, I always ask for a map of the city. From the rental car agency, I looked at both the immediate vicinity. I look at the bigger map. That's the only way I can navigate any new unknown territory, right? So to me, models are the only way my brain can think. And the only one challenge I have for you is there's one guy by name Oliver who has been building models. He just goes like a machine building model after model after model. But his models they look very powerful to me, but they are so abstract that I cannot even follow. So I think in terms of a connection, I'll kind of challenge you to look at any of his model and then see whether you can make a connection to what he's talking about. This is more of an offline conversation, but I'll be more than happy to connect.
So to my comment earlier about saying that I used to inflict my models on other people, and inflict was just what you're talking about, to offer you a model that you can't comprehend is of no value to you whatsoever. And the questions that you are likely to ask are not likely to benefit the evolution of our collective understanding.
Right.
So, I mean, it took me a long time to realize how dumb I was in terms of what I was doing. Right. So this piece here about so once upon a time I developed this certified systems thinker program, and everybody thought I was being extremely presumptuous, and I got rave reviews from it. And then a couple of people went through it, and at the end they said, this is absolutely awesome. How do I sell systems thinking to my organization? And I just had a meltdown because they missed it. They completely missed the point. Though I pondered it for a couple of weeks, and I realized, or I came up with 5 reasons why you can't sell systems thinking to your organization. And the first is people always do exactly what makes the most amount of sense to them based on their current understanding in the context of the moment. I've had endless discussions with that particular statement, and to date, no one has yet found a white crow. Right? If you find a white crow, I'll change my mind. And then the question of buying and selling. There's a marvelous book by Spencer Johnson in the late 80s, I think, called The 1 Minute Salesperson. And you don't have to read the book because there's only one statement in it that I thought was really meaningful. And it said, well, almost everyone loves to buy, almost no one likes to be sold. Right? Because if I come to you and try to sell you something, I'm implying that I know more than you do. So I've just discounted you.
Right.
Right? The connection that I made here was the person wandering around in a department store looking at things, and the clerk walks up and says, may I help you? And the typical response is, no, I'm just looking. Though I said, why is that the response? Well, the clerk just discounted the shopper. And what runs through the shopper's mind in about a microsecond is, how can this person be so presumptuous as to think I need help? I'm perfectly capable of helping myself. Go away, don't bother me, right? So, I mean, it's those kinds of things. And from Fight Club, I mean, the first rule of Fight Club is don't talk about Fight Club. So I decided the first rule of systems thinking was don't ever talk about systems thinking. Unless you're talking to people who've been drinking the Kool-Aid for a long time. and it's just, Buckminster Fuller said that it doesn't make any sense to fight with the current organization or paradigm. You simply have to build a new one and allow the old one to pass away, which is pretty much what the nature of scientific revolution said. And then leadership, Lao Tzu said, you have to honor people and they will honor you. So when the sage has finished his work, they will say, we did it ourselves. So that you have to approach all of this stuff so that people simply evolve a way of understanding what it is that they're wrestling with. But you don't ever have to talk about systems thinking. You don't have to tell them that they have to go learn something that they don't know about and discount them and make them feel bad and become defensive. So you just say, there's Tom Peters, one of the guys that wrote In Search of Excellence in '84, said in one of his videos, there was this turnaround artist that would go into a failing organization, and in a very short period of time, the organization would be turned around and back in the black and doing well. And he said, I had to meet this guy and find out how it was that he did this. And he said, when I talked to him, he says, how do you continue to turn these places around? He said, well, there's no secret. I just come into one of these ailing organizations and I wander around and I talk to people, ask them what the problems are, and they tell me, and I say, why don't you fix it? And they do, and I get rich. And he's enabling the organization to, I mean, the people in the organization know what the problems are. You got to enable them to go ahead and act and correct it. Now, this whole conference is supposed to be about agile. I've been following Tesla quite closely for several years now. And in terms of what they're doing in terms of agile is just beyond belief. They're doing agile at the speed of thought. The car that comes off of the production line today is not the car that came off the production line yesterday. I mean, they are changing the production of their cars moment to moment every time they figure out something to improve. And there are numerous videos of Joe Justice doing interviews with other people talking about agile at Tesla and their digital self-management. Every time that they figure out they have someplace in the process that needs an approval for something, they figure out how to develop an AI system to actually take care of the approval and take another person out of the sequence, so that, what Elon keeps saying about the best part is no part, the best process is no process, and they're actually on their way to getting many people to realize that the best car is no car. I don't know if I came close to whatever the question was you asked me.
I think that there is a saying, not all the wanderers are lost. When
Okay.
you're looking in a department store, you're not necessarily lost, right?
Right.
You are looking around to explore, not anything specific. Many times you just do it just to see what is interesting is available. So, but I think it's a fascinating what you're describing. We would love to connect offline with you to kind of explore.
Well, my email's in the chat. Send me an email or connect. Or I mean, I retired 15 years ago, and I spent all of my time connecting with people, talking about whatever's on our mind, because I can't stop. So, anyone else have questions? I don't bite, not lately.
Let me see here. I can make a connection. Oh, we are connected already. Okay.
Okay.
I didn't realize we were connected. So let me get your email from the chat.
Okay.
I'll send you a message. You're based in, oh, I'm in Atlanta, so we're not too far.
Oh, okay. Okay. I like questions, really. There won't be a test.
One question I have is, what can companies do to pay attention to organizational learning? They seem to be, all the companies are busy with executing. Do you believe they can actually spend maybe 2%, 5% of the time in a week to reflect and learn so that they can adapt? Do you think we are paying enough attention to learning at an individual level, at a team level, at an organization level? Are we learning?
Well, absolutely. They're learning all the time. Just a lot of the stuff they're learning, they shouldn't be learning. It's just, the easiest way to improve productivity is to find the things that you don't need to do and quit doing them. Right? So the way that Jeff was doing in the last presentation, I don't know if you were listening to Jeff Morrow.
Yeah, I did.
About, different people seeing things different ways and coming and arguing about their own perspectives, whereas progress is dependent upon the collective understanding evolving, which means that they all need to understand each other's perspectives. What I said about, what you believe for a reason. And rather than me argue about that reason, it is better for me to understand the foundation of where it is you're coming from. Was it Covey in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People said something about seek first to understand and then to be understood. And there was another piece there someplace. My absolute hero is Columbo. I don't know if the detectives on TV in the late 70s, early 80s, Columbo had this knack of continually going around and asking other people to help him understand things that he just couldn't figure out when he actually already had figured most of them out. But the whole idea was to simply, rather than make people defensive, to sort of bring them closer and ask them to help him understand. I actually wrote a paper once called Change Management, the Columbo Approach. And to another comment that was made sometime in one of the sessions today about about we don't think about the implications of our actions. It seems as though when we think we have figured out the answer to the problem, we stop thinking, right? And as Senki said, seldom can you ever do just one thing. Everything that you do has multiple implications. So I've got some models that talk about creating the future in a way that the way that you can look at the implications of the actions that you take to try and head off problems at the past before they occur. I'm a great fan of what's commonly called archetypes. I prefer to when I talk to people that aren't in the systems community, I simply talk about frequently recurring structures, because that phrase doesn't confuse them. And archetypes, you have to explain to them what archetypes are. You cannot create a relationship model that's not just a bunch of archetypes, because there are only three basic structures to begin with. There's an independent growth, a reinforcing exponential growth, and a goal-seeking balancing structure. It's like the electron, neutron, and the proton in the atom, and everything else in a periodic table, which is all of the archetypes, are made up of those three structures. So whatever model that you end up developing, if you look at the Afghan strategy model, it's just a bunch of these pieces stuck together. And if you watch Eric Berlow's TED talk about the Afghan strategy model, he says, it looks complicated or complex, and there's only a small handful of actionable items in it. And I think the people that developed it were paid by the connection as opposed to produce meaning. Hope everybody else is enjoying our conversation, Manny.
Now, do you follow the graph theory?
The which theory?
Graph theory, the knowledge graph.
Not sure I know.
There is in terms of learning, what you're describing as your journey about concepts and their relationships, right? In the traditional databases, we go back to relational databases to 1970s. We put all the information in tables, right? But the focus on tables are all entities. We don't pay too much attention to the relationship. The relationship is actually a secondary thought. And then because relationship secondary, we end up creating hundreds and hundreds of tables. And then the relationship forgotten. We try to put all linkages to it. Then finally, we lost the bigger picture. All we know is relationship one at a time between two entities. So there is a new theory of organizing information into knowledge graphs.
Oh, okay.
Where they
with you now.
To the relationship first, then the entities and people and things secondary. So by putting emphasis on relationships, it is a better representation of knowledge than data modeling. I find it very fascinating. So you may want to give some reading. I think it goes well with your journey so far. You might find it some connections to your journey already.
Okay. Well, Stephen, I guess we got to wrap this up.
Yeah, we are getting close to the end of it. We've got a few more minutes left, though. Does anyone else have any questions? I've been enjoying this conversation.
Well, I've got another question while we are waiting. What are your thoughts on adaptive IQ of organizations? Adaptive IQ goes beyond resilience. Resilience, in my mind, is the ability to spring back to the original shape after a catastrophe. But while the resilience is good, foundational, we actually need more adaptive because the things have changed. No point in coming back to where you were before. Based on your journey so far, whether it is individuals or teams or organizations, how do you see adaptive IQ, the ability to adapt quickly to the environment, at least at the same rate as the change to the environment?
How do I say? I see it as essential. I don't know how you, are there people that are trying to figure out how to measure it?
No, we know for a fact that the organizations lag in their ability to sense and adapt to the marketplace, to the environment, to the technology changes, right?
Well, the current operation of the organization is the path of least resistance.
Yeah,
Any deviation from that takes effort, so that it typically snaps back. And you know what we do on an ongoing, our habits are paths of least resistance, because we can do them mostly on autopilot. Right? To consciously change them takes effort, and we have to have a reason to do that.
right.
And someone once told me that the reason most organizational change efforts fail is because they miss an essential piece of the puzzle. The 4 pieces of the puzzle are know what, know why, care why, know how. And it's the 3rd piece that's always missing. Right? Because I've been doing this way for the last 5 years, and now you tell me I got to do it differently. You're going to fire me? What? You know, I mean, I walked into an organization who said, this isn't working. And I said, okay, why should it? When was the last time you fired somebody for not doing this? Well, they said, well, we can't do that. I said, okay. Nobody believes that you're serious about the change.
Right. I think there were several examples given why. I think I like this example. The guys who were selling ice before the invention of cooling and refrigeration, the guys who were selling ice and then delivering ice to households and organizations are not the company that invented the refrigerator.
Of course not. They're in the ice business.
So if you're an ice making company, you're going to be continuously improving how to make ice quicker, how to sell ice quicker, how to deliver quicker. Yeah, that's all good. But if somebody invented a refrigerator that is being sold, they don't want to buy ice anymore. That's a shift we all seem to miss. There is a fundamental change taking place. We can't be doing whatever we've been doing for the last 100 years.
I just posted a link, Manny, to a paper written by Theodore Levitt in 1975 called Marketing Myopia, which is essentially why the railroads got into trouble for being in the railroad business, and why Hollywood got in the trouble for being in the moving picture business as opposed to the entertainment business. So it's a marvelous article.
1975.
Yeah. The only thing that we have learned from history is that we don't learn much from history.
No, the amount of wisdom, as you go back and look at some of these papers and books 20, 30, 40 years ago, you really wish, oh my God, they have said it in such simple terms, right?
Yeah.
I don't think anybody reads the wisdom that is sitting there right in plain sight.
Well, it's a question of, do I know that I need to know something? Okay. We get very comfortable. We need other people to jolt us out of our comfort zone from time to time. Which is why I say that, you know, I begin every day under the assumption that everything I currently believe could be wrong. And you know, more organizations ought to do that, because if they don't eat their lunch, somebody else is going to eat it for them sooner or later. You know, you look at Tesla, all of the other auto manufacturers migrating into the EV space are competing with Tesla. Tesla says their number one competitor is Saudi Aramco, not a car company.
Right.
It's a different mindset. So,
But
okay.
I keep going back to your first circle. That's the
All
very
right.
powerful, the word awaken is so powerful. I don't think we appreciate, like, are you awake?
For a little while anyway. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Gene, and thank you so much, Monty, for helping out with the discussion.
Absolutely.